Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of our podcast. I am Rihanna, and today we are going to have a laid back but meaningful conversation about assessment, what it really means in education, how we use it, and how we can make it better. Joining me today is the wonderful Miss Rogers, who is passionate about teaching and learning. Miss Rogers, thank you for being here today with us.
Thank you, Rihanna. So, assessment is something we deal with every day as teachers, but I feel like we don't stop to think about why we do it or how we can improve it.
Exactly. We're also going to hear from Miss Alpha Roberts later in the show, who will share some great insight about what make a great assessment tool. So let's dive in. Okay, Miss Rogers, let's start at the beginning. When we talk about assessment, a lot of people immediately thinks of exam, tests, or grades. But assessment is much more than that, right?
Absolutely. It's not just about grading, but it's also about guiding learning. Fontella 2011 talks about how assessment has three big purposes. One, helping pupils to learn. So good assessment gives people feedback so they know what they're doing well and where they need to improve. Two, helping teachers teach. When we assess, we're actually gathering information about our own teaching. We gather information about what's working, what's not, and how we can adjust. Also, three, measuring progress. Yes, grade matters, but only when they actually reflect learning. So if assessment is done right, it tells us whether the pupils are truly understanding and applying what they learn.
I love that. It really shifts the mindset from testing student to supporting them. I think sometimes assessment really stress students because it seems as a judgment day rather than a helpful tool.
Exactly, but when we use assessment right, it becomes a part of the learning process and not just the end results.
So now that we know why we assess, let's talk about what we assess. I think a lot of people assume it's all about knowledge, like what did you memorize? Can you repeat that? But Fuente Alba points out that there's actually three domains we should be looking at. First, there's a cognitive domain, which is all about thinking skill. This is where things like critical thinking, problem solving, and understanding concepts come in.
Exactly right. So that is what most traditional tests focus on. Math problems, essays, multiple choice questions.
But then we have the affective domain, which is about student values, emotion. Are students learning how to work in group? Are they developing a love for learning? Are they becoming more confident?
And this is so underrated. We don't always assess how pupils feel about learning, but motivation and mindset are huge parts of our success.
Exactly. And finally, there is the psychomotor domain, which is about the physical skill. Things like writing neatly, performing experiment, or playing an instrument.
In reality, we should be assessing all three domains, not just what pupils know, but also how they apply it and how they feel about it.
I love that perspective. It makes learning feel whole instead of just textbook based. Okay, so we know why we assess and what we assess, but how do we know if we're assessing the right way? To help us with that, we have a special guest joining us, Miss Alpha Roberts. She's calling in to share her thoughts on what makes a good assessment tool. Miss Roberts, welcome to the show.
Hi, Rihanna and Miss Rogers. Thanks for having me. I really love this conversation because assessment is such a big part of what we do as teachers. So, according to Fontialba, a good assessment tool has three key qualities. Validity. So this answered questions such as, does it really measure what it's supposed to? If I say I'm testing critical thinking, am I really doing that, or am I just testing memory? The second point is reliability. Will this assessment give consistent results? If I gave the same test next week, would students get roughly the same scores? And finally, we have practicality. Is this something that's realistic? Can teachers administer it easily? And can students complete it without unnecessary stress?
I love that last one. Sometimes we design assessments that are so complicated that they end up causing more confusion than clarity.
Right. If a test is so hard to grade that the teacher fears marking it, then maybe we should rethink it.
Good point. Thank you so much, Miss Roberts, for sharing your wisdom with us.
It's my pleasure, Rihanna. Keep up the great conversation.
Well, that's a wrap on today's episode. Let's do a quick recap. Miss Roger explained the purpose of assessment is to support learning, guide teachers, and measure progress. We also explained the three domains of assessment, which is cognitive, affective, and psychomotor. And finally, Miss Roberts shared key characteristic of a good assessment tool, which is validity, reliability, and practicality. A huge thank you to Miss Rogers and Miss Roberts for being a part of this discussion. And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in.